Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Well, guys, it's been a minute. I've been in Chicago with my colleagues at the Union plotting out 2025 and 2026. More to come on that soon. But I will have a full slate of interesting guests, some new voices next week that I hope you will tune in for. But before I do that, guys, just a little weekend thinking. A couple of things. One is, guys, I've said this over and over again, and I think we need to really take it to heart. I'm going to ask you to take it to heart. We saw a tragedy in the Potomac River a couple of nights ago. I have flown in and out of Reagan National more times than I can count since I was probably like 6 months old. So I have been in that flight path. I've been on that river. My parents lived in Old Town for many years. The flights, flew over their house for 20 plus years. So, the fact that Donald Trump and all the other made for TV goons made it about DEI shouldn't surprise you. This is exactly what they were going to do. And so, what I am asking of my friends, my fellow Romans, my countrymen, either if you're listening to this or if you are part of the online left or the media or the whatever democratic establishment, such as it is, like, if you're not surprised, don't freak out. If you're not surprised, don't go moaning and wailing and screaming into the night. Like, we knew that he was going to do something like this. It should not be of any surprise. Only focusing on it gives him and the people around him exactly what they want, which is more credence and more attention for their cockamamie and BS ideas. It wasn't caused by DEI. He knows that. You know that. I know that. We all know that. But that's not the point, guys. We keep forgetting the point. We are in 100% an attention economy, and he is really good at it. And you don't have to fall for the trap every time. You don't have to make it what he wants it to be every time. If you see the bear trap, don't step in it. If someone, as you're walking down the street, invites you into a dark alley, don't go. You can simply say, this is ridiculous. We know it's all ridiculous, without hyperbole, without, again, the gnashing of teeth and the rending of garments that happens so often now, that I hope is, and I assume is mostly legitimate. And look, it can be enraging, but to what end? What end are you getting out of the expression and the emission of all of that psychic energy? If it makes you feel better, fine. As I've said many times, though, let's be clear about what it is you're doing, which is you're not moving any ball. You're not convincing anybody. If the prism by which you're trying to move things is popular opinion, which is really, I'm not even sure they care about, but would be the only thing they could care about, do you believe talking to the same people over and over again about the same things that didn't work for the last year, 2 years, 5 years, or whatever, is really the way forward? My short answer is no. There's more nuance to it, but I'm going to say the answer is no. And we shouldn't do it. We should do things that are helpful. We should focus on things such as the idea that there's a bunch of schools in Oklahoma who had to go virtual this week because the influenza rate is like 34%. That's crazy town. That also speaks to a downstream effect of people not wanting to get either themselves or their kids vaccinated. Not to mention, I have had the flu, influenza A, this year. I got vaccinated, and it was very rough. So I'm not saying that there aren't external factors. I'm just saying that that seems to be something that is a real world effect of people like a Bobby Kennedy or a Donald Trump or any of the insanity that we're seeing. Kansas has a massive tuberculosis outbreak, right? I mean, this is not Tombstone, right? These are not Val Kilmer playing Doc Holliday. Like, tuberculosis? I mean, is it 1870? And so I think there are plenty of things we can and should focus on. But again, we have to focus on the people that will ultimately sway these decisions. And you may be a thought leader. You may be someone with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of followers. But ask yourself, much like we have committed so much time and attention to how the right has created its own media bubble, have the people on the left or the anti-Trump side created such a media bubble of their own that anyone who might be able to join can't or won't. Just food for thought, just a question I'm asking. Let's talk about, too, while I've got the Democrats on the brain. A lot of people that, I also said don't kick and scream about things that Trump is going to do if they're not surprising, have also been excoriating, I think rightfully so, a lot of the Democratic leadership in Washington, D.C. I'm 100% with you there. Um, watching Chuck Schumer and his compatriots go up there is watching like Andropov and Brezhnev and Chernyenko, in the late 70s and early 80s. Like, this shows no dynamism, shows no energy, shows no understanding of the world around. Just merely you hung around long enough, you raise enough money, and people leave you in your jobs. That's not meritocratic. I know meritocracy has gotten a lot of airplay and a lot of ink, but are these the best people for the job? My answer is I don't think so. As my regular featured guest, Abigail Tracy, noted something to me in a conversation this week. Back in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was this group of three young Republicans, and they called themselves the Young Guns: Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, and Eric Cantor. And the idea was that they were going to basically put a kinder, gentler face on Ayn Rand, right? They were going to put a kinder, gentler, more modern face on the Republican Party. And I do believe that they believed they could do that. Again, it was a marketing tactic. It wasn't anything substantive. But the one thing that Abby noted that I thought was really smart, that, in the U.S. House, Republicans, when they're in the majority, can only serve as a chair of a committee for 3 terms, 6 years. And then they got to hand the reins off to somebody else, which necessarily means that there's always somebody in the wings ready to come up, be a leader, be someone new, be a new face. The Democrats are still playing by the rules of, LBJ and, the barons of this, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, right? You've been around, you're going to be around. No one's going to take that job from you. No one's going to take that gavel from you. No one's going to take that ranking position on a committee from you, because it's been your turn. And again, I think that, as I've written previously, in the context of, let's say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, if you told me I would be pushing for her to have a more substantive role in Democrats fighting back, one, I think she's earned, and second, I think she's very good at. I'm not sure I would have believed you 5 or 10 years ago. But if you're going to have someone who has the ability to talk to people in your base, right, and keep them fired up and keep them engaged, I think you'd want that, as opposed to the septuagenarian and octogenarians you now have occupying so many spaces. There's another example. A friend of mine just sent me this. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker just signed his own executive order that said if you were convicted of a crime related to January 6th, you can't get a job in Illinois. I think that's great. I think that's a great thing. First and foremost, if you have that on your record, even if it's been expunged and you've been pardoned, it should be a black mark against you. Second, this is the example of a Democratic governor utilizing the power they have. As I have written and said so many times, Democrats have an uncomfortable relationship with power. Not everyone, right? Nancy Pelosi very much understood it. LBJ understood it more than anybody. Harry Reid, right? You have a long history of legislators who very much understood the nature of power and were willing to use it to accomplish their goals. You take Pritzker's lead on this, right? Be unafraid, as I have said. You don't have power in a lot of places. If you're a Democrat who does have authority, you should wield some of it. If it's because, is it performative? Maybe. But you know what? It also drives the other side nuts. And there's something to be said for that. That getting under the skin of these people is always a good way to make them act crazier. And then maybe you will start to break through into otherwise normal people's consciousness. But right now, as you guys are often feeling, and I know I'm feeling, everybody's really tired, everybody's exhausted, everybody's at sea. Those are normal things in times like this throughout history. We're all trying to get our bearings. Let me also say that is unpleasant a time as this last couple of weeks has been, and in the next couple of weeks and months and years will be. It's also been an opportunity for me to go through my own political evolution, from 2015, 2016, when I decided there was no possible way I could be a Republican, through my time at the Lincoln Project and as much, good work as we did there, moving on to, the leadership of the union and new adventures, I think is a necessary and hopeful place for me to go personally. But now I'm asking you guys who are listening and watching to do the same thing, which is, if everything the Democrats have done up to this point has led us to this place, should we keep doing these things? Should we, as who are non-Republicans, and I'm a non-Democrat too, but I guess I'd line up more with Democrats in this moment, should we continue to say those are the right things for us to do politically, from a values proposition, anything like that, from a leadership position? The Democrats are about to have an election for their national chair, whatever. Ben Wickler, who I've not met, but I like a lot. I've seen what he's done in Wisconsin. I hope he wins. I think he's got a lot of good ideas for how to change the party structure for the better. But also, let's be clear, like, a lot of what he's discussing, rightfully so, is logistical and financial, process oriented. Okay, that's fine. That's really that job. Fundraising as well. But it's not Ben's job or the DNC chairman's job to rescue the Democratic Party from itself, from an ideological and from a values perspective. That's something that other leaders and local leaders and state leaders are going to have to do. We can be upset. We should be upset about the fact that Donald Trump won the election last year. But we should also be very clear about where we are. As I noted, Jim Stockdale's quote, be very clear about where we are and how we got here. And until and unless we're all willing to do that, and I speak to my Democratic friends directly about that, we're not going to get anywhere. If you're not willing to accept that the voters that cost us the election were not the people that voted for Donald Trump, but the people who stayed home, understanding the consequences of their action, which was, I'm so disconnected from this process or from my party that I don't feel motivated enough, or I don't care enough, or it doesn't matter enough for me to participate. That's not a problem of the Republicans. That is a problem of your own making. Political parties have one job: to win elections. That's it. That is it. Candidates have one job: to win elections so that they may make policy on behalf of those people who not only voted for them, but also didn't vote for them, right? Brass tacks here, everybody. The problem of 2024 and before is not one of logistics. It's not one of data. It's not one of polling. It is far deeper than that. And it needs to be understood. And it needs to be understood by the people who are currently in power, the people who would run for office, and the people who would elect those people to office. Because right now, and I just saw this clip that I found from Succession, when the brothers are talking to the Norwegian guy, one of the Skarsgård brothers, right? And what's his name? Kendall says it's a great brand, and Skarsgård said, bad brand, good parts. You're a parts shop. I think that's probably where the Democrats are right now. You got a lot of great parts, got a lot of great people, many of whom, hundreds, thousands, who have dedicated everything they can to winning elections and bringing the Democratic Party's voice to a place where not only voters, but constituents and Americans across the country could hear the message that you have to offer. The problem is, it's a bad brand. As an activist told me, I felt like I went to the door and the Democratic Party didn't have standing. That's not a logistical problem. That's an existential problem. And so I think that's one that we have to really understand where we go from here. And it's going to take new voices, and it's going to take new people, and it's going to take the old voices and those who have been co-opted by an imperial capital, and that's what Washington, D.C. is at this point, to understand that your grip on the party, its apparatus, its donors, its fealty to a system that not only does not exist anymore, but does not exist for the betterment of all Americans, from the baby to the old man, right? If you're not unwilling to see that, then you are too part of the problem, not part of the solution. But you know that already because you've already gotten in line. You've already decided, I can get through 4 years and we'll see what happens. Maybe, maybe we shouldn't take anything for granted. That's the other part. Like, stop being, I'll go back to what I said about DEI. Stop being surprised. Stop pretending you're surprised. You knew what we were going to get if we reelected this guy, and we did it. And now you've fallen in line. What are we going to do now? I don't know. I've got to find a job. Okay, well, like, politics is a hard business. Washington's, it can be a tough town, right? If politics isn't your thing, go do something useful, right? Or something that you like, even if it's not particularly useful. But sitting around and, screaming into the void and pounding away at blue sky and, all of the other stuff isn't going to get us anywhere. We need to find ways to address the urgency of now, the midterms to come, and the long-term problem this country faces, not just the Democratic Party, but this country faces. We are on the precipice, gang. We need to understand that. If we don't understand that, then we will fall deeper and deeper into this hole until it is very difficult to find the light. But I'm an optimist, but I'm like a normative realist, maybe is a better way to put it. In some philosophy person is going to tell me I'm using all this wrong, right? Like, I understand the world as it is, but also as I think it should be, right? I understand the reality of the world in which we live. I have an optimism. I prefer not to allow pessimism to infect me too much. But again, I think there's a difference between pessimism and realism. Maybe they're the same thing in this time, right? Understanding how bad it could be, understanding how bad it's likely to be. We're 2 weeks into this, guys, right? We got another 4 years of it. And that doesn't include all of the insanity that's likely to come and all of the fallout that's likely to come. But as I wrote in my latest piece, and I'll put the link down at the Substack, right? We have to be understanding, like, the flood is upon us. What will the world look like when those waters recede? What will they look like? To say the wave isn't coming doesn't work. To say the waters haven't risen doesn't work. To scream at the wave to go back to where it came from doesn't work. The Trumpism will recede. It will plateau and it will recede. And as it does, the nature of the damage caused will become more and more clear. But we must prepare for that time, right? Prepare for that time so that when the time comes, there has been a framework built or a life raft built, whatever the bad ocean-based metaphor I could use is, to say, here's where we go from here, to chart that path, to cross the ocean together. But it's going to take more carpenters and less jackasses. It's going to take more shipwrights and less pirates. We need to work together, but we need to have a clear vision of what that means. And it doesn't mean that every time Donald Trump, in his orangiest of orange makeups, gets behind the podium and says crazy things, that everybody has to run around looking for lighters to light their hair on fire, right? You don't have to do that. That doesn't mean you have to close your eyes to it or close your ears to it. It means you don't owe him the psychic energy, right? He's an energy vampire, for my friends who are fans of What We Do in the Shadows. Your rage enlivens him. Your anger gives him life. That's not to say you don't have to disagree vehemently with what they do and what they're going to do. But it does mean we should conserve that energy, protect ourselves from the worst of it, and find out how to march forward together. As always, gang, I want to say thank you for listening. Like I said, going to have a lot of fun guests on next week. You can always find me on Twitter and TikTok and says us, now in the App Store and the Google Play Store, at Reed Galen. Threads and Instagram, at Reed_Galen USA. I'm at LinkedIn, I think, at Reed Galen. I don't know. Go to my link tree. It's all there, Reed Galen. Go to Substack, also called The Homefront. Guys, thank you. Everybody have a good, happy, healthy, safe weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.